Okay, we've started recording, Gene, so we're gonna got the other one running, and we're now gonna do PowerPoint. Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Harrison, and I want to thank the Mankind Project, the Florida chapter, for inviting me to give this talk today. I'd like to thank my wife, Linda, for getting me back involved in the Mankind Project, and our area steward, John Warren, for coaching me on public speaking and mission and a lot of other things. So thank you both very much. So what I want to talk today is about the value of mission. I'm talking to you, the public, and veterinarians about conservation and agriculture. My agenda today will be finding your mission, modern agriculture, some of the areas of concern in agriculture, and the areas are things like monocropping, pesticides, CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, and genetic modified organisms, and how we can make a difference. First of all, finding your mission. I asked myself, why is organic farming the key to the health of the world? And my mankind mission that I've developed with my brothers this last year is that I express my passion for a world of organic agriculture and healthy food for people and their pets by teaching and sharing resources with others. And what we need to do on this mission is use critical thinking, and I'm encouraging you to do that when you dive into projects like this. Am I or you open to the perspectives that we're discussing and new information, new perspectives, new information? There's no question that the Earth is telling us a mass extinction is occurring. And that's a quote from David L. Attenborough. But he says there is hope, as do other people. But we have to act now, and we have to act boldly. Once you decide that you're going to make a difference and you've got your mission, you have to live it. And my company has followed my mission. We found a way to balance our markets so we can work with my passion and help save the planet from the destruction of mega agriculture. So my passion has become my mission. I focus on making the world better through education. Simply put, poor treatment of our soils, which is a living organism. It's not dirt, it's soil. And mega agriculture, concentrated animal feeding operations are the forces behind our current environmental degradation. Farming has evolved over time. This is a picture of my grandfather's farm in Iowa, where he spent a lot of time when I was a child with me, I would go out there and help him do minor little chores. But that's my uncle down there in the bottom in a picture I painted where he's milking the cow. And you can see that's not hundreds of cows and a lot of equipment. He's hand milking. And that's a bygone days. And up in the right-hand corner is my father and my sisters. And we had a passion for wildlife. Not only did we hunt, didn't think there was anything wrong with eating meat or killing animals for food. And my dad was a passionate bird watcher. He built that little boat up in the top of that picture for wrens and martins to live in. And you can see that there's fence rows and trees and all kinds of things on my grandfather's farm. What's driving mega agriculture? Well, that's a typical mega agriculture field on the left. It's companies driving their techniques, not on environmental science, but on profit. And for example, they're mainly growing in Nebraska and Iowa cheap corn and soybean with government subsidies, and they use this massive equipment that they're working to become robots in the future that won't need people out there to do these big fields. And the other thing that's disturbing to me as a scientist is that science is not helping. Pesticides not only destroy insects and bird population, they destroy the biome, the life in the soil that makes it vital to be really soil where it helps the plant grow. You don't have to add anything to soil to make plants grow. And then we find some of these industry scientists are falsifying records. And one of the most common agriculture chemicals that's used is made from petroleum is anhydrous ammonia. And that's a source of nitrogen. It's a gas, so a lot of it escapes when it's put in the ground. It's not environmentally conscious. So some of the things that bring this to fruition: in 1845, Ireland suffered a tremendous famine because they'd been planting the same variety of potatoes for a couple, 3 years, and they got a blight, an infection in those potatoes because of the immunosuppression of the potatoes. First of all, they took a potato that wasn't designed to grow in Ireland, and that's all they grew because it was a big white potato. And the crops all failed, and 14 million Irish people starved to death. In the 20s, in the United States, we had the monocropping of wheat, and that became the Dust Bowl in the 30s. And that led to the Depression and all the things of those eras. In the 50s, we went all out for pesticides like DDT, and my grandfather was one of the first to start to use DDT for the corn borer. I had no idea that I was on the cusp of this beginning chemical disaster. But when I got out of veterinary school and I started following Rachel Carson and all the things that were going on, my fellow veterinarians were starting to work with rescuing wildlife. And we started seeing why was that happening. And then Rachel Carson Council showed that in, a, in a meeting that held called Pesticides, Wildlife, and People, that these pesticides were harmful. And we'll look a little bit more about that. 1990 to 2020, Rachel Carson Council and many other scientist groups, especially Stephanie Seneff, have shown that glyphosate, which is Roundup, is an immunosuppression. So what are the areas we're concerned about when it comes to agriculture? Well, monocropping first, pesticides, concentrated animal feeding operations, genetically modified organisms, global environmental degradation, and immune suppression. What is monocropping? Well, that's an example of if you planted this crop year after year, then that's monocropping. You replace the diverse crops that farmers used to use and our organic farmers have gone back to. They raise wheat, wheat. Now we raise corn. We do rotate it with soy to get a little bit of plant nitrogen in there. Plus, soy is a very valuable product for the feed market. But it allows this monocropping to be handled with this huge machinery. But we're now seeing it in almonds and avocados all over the world that are going to monocropping. And this leads to an increased use of pesticides and a reliance on GMOs. The impact of monocropping on the soil, it takes away the humus, the biomass that's produced there, and when it dies, the soil can't hold water. And so year after year, the soil quits regenerating, and then the moisture that's held in there by those biome community called humus, it's a sponge that holds water, disappears, the soil turns to dust, and we get these massive dust storms like we saw in the Dust Bowl days. And this dust went all over and buried homes and cars. The soil became eroded, and much of the topsoil and the farms went into the rivers, and it was very devastating. So monocropping takes the moisture holding capacity out of the soil, which was built by the mycorrhizal community. And that mycorrhizal community also works with worms and other beneficial life forms. And this monocropping hinders all those life forms. So those life forms have now been shown to be communicating with others. So trees communicate, and And they have a lot of benefits from that communication. That's all disrupted when you monocrop. And then there's pesticides. Well, in the United States, we're over reliant on these, and it's because we don't follow the example of the European Union. In the European Union, you can only use chemicals that are proven to be safe. And lots of these chemicals haven't been proven to be safe in Europe, so they're manufactured there and sold here, or in Brazil, or India, or China, or Africa. But in the United States, chemicals must be proven to be harmful before they're banned, and with all the uh, political issues with people paying to have rules made, uh, it's very hard to prove that something's harmful in today's environment. So we have all these harmful chemicals still being used, and then we have scientists saying they're not harmful and companies saying they're not harmful, and they pay out a little bit of money to people, but they don't really do what's absolutely necessary. So pesticides kill indiscriminately. When you eliminate the pests, there's still plenty of power left there. It kills beneficial insects, kills birds and that fungi that is critical for the regeneration of the soil. Pesticides are dangerous to the environment because they also run off, and we're seeing the effects of these chemicals on our oceans and wildlife throughout the world. And they're dangerous to humans. They've shown, when I was in veterinary school, there was a lot of information about glyphosate causing lymphoma in dogs. And now they've shown it also causes cancer in people. And now linked the COVID epidemics to the immunosuppression caused by glyphosate. And we've talked a little bit about that soil damage, but that's one of the big long-term lasting effects of the way we're treating our soils. And it could take 50 years to get these soils back in shape. And it's because the earth is trying to repair this situation. So the pests gradually get stronger and stronger. The weeds and the pest insects get resistant to the pesticides. And so constantly increasing the kinds and strengths of the various herbicides and insecticides. But that resistance is right behind the increased use. The race is just not sustainable. Well, what happens with pesticides and birds when the Rachel Carson Council had that amazing meeting in 1998? They proved that birds basically are suffering from brain damage from pesticides. Does that sound familiar to Alzheimer's, any of those kinds of things happening anywhere? They couldn't recognize or perform their mating rituals. They didn't understand the singing, or if they sang, they didn't sing the right song. And the males often had no sperm, so the eggs were infertile. They did have chicks. The parents were uncoordinated, immunosuppressed, so they weren't strong enough to go out and find enough food. When they did hunt for food, they hunted for easy food along roadsides, or if they migrated, they were confused, they hit buildings, and they had trouble finding, hunting, and feeding their young. The impact of pesticides on wild birds has been difficult to scientifically prove, and that's because of this triangle points it out. When a bird is sick from pesticides and dies, it's usually not observed. It's in the wild, it's in a bush, it falls to the ground, and it's probably eaten pretty quickly. And then there's people may observe that the bird's not doing well, but they don't know that they should probably take them and find something done. And then people do pick up injured wildlife, but most of the places that take care of injured wildlife don't have the money or the staff or the consultants to do the proper pathology and diagnostic tests to prove what the cause of death was. So they reported it, but they didn't confirm it. And then there's the few cases that get observed, reported, and confirmed that were presented in that uh, amazing seminar on the impact of pesticides on wildlife and humans. Well, birds not only change their habitats, they looking for food, they also have to change their habitats for their nesting to feed and breed. And a good case is the impact on ducks. The prairie potholes where a lot of the endangered ducks were holding their own for a long time got filled in. That was a place where the ice age sheets thawed out and then left a big hole called a prairie pothole. And farmers needed more land, so they filled those potholes in and started raising crops like sunflower seeds is a big one in the prairie pothole area. And all the pesticides and everything used on those prairie potholes kills the food source for the baby ducks. If there is enough water left there to breed on, then they die of starvation. So it's a pretty thorough decimation of ducks. The concentrated animal feeding operations. This, in most states, is protected from the public's eye by laws that lobbyists have put in place for these mega agriculture companies. You can't go in and take pictures and document this cruelty. They are inhumane and they're ecologically devastating. They use cheap food to maintain these animal groups in these massive industrial deplorable conditions. And the runoff, rather than take care of it properly, they put it in lagoons or they bury it or they just let it wash into the environment. Very seldom is it handled correctly. And in these recent disasters with hurricanes, we've seen billions of animals uh, drowned and all kinds of things because of captives. Well, in cattle, they're forced to eat things that they shouldn't eat. Their cattle are vegetarians, but not vegetables from high energy seeds, but grasses. And they're forced to eat corn, and basically they eat ethanol waste that comes from corn and soy byproducts. And this produces a lot of methane gas. Cattle normally produce methane gas when they digest grass, but they don't produce much of it when they eat grass. A lot more when they eat these terrible diets. That they do grow fast and they do gain a lot of high expensive meat cuts, but they get digestive disturbances, they get immunosuppressed, they have to be put on antibiotics, they have to be put on anti-bloat chemicals, digestive aids, and growth stimulants. All things that give you a meat product that isn't the ideal thing to be eating. So when you combine CAFOs with mega agriculture, you see the solid waste from feathers, manure, rotting waste contribute to the impact of uh, the environment by runoff, and it's decimating the water tables and all the aquifers and rivers all over the country. And also, when they combine, they go down the Mississippi River and they create this massive dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. Because of the storms, that dead zone actually decreased because the water got stirred up and everybody thought, oh, we're doing such a better job because the dead zones decreased in size. So that's not really true. Well, here's the amazing dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico at the mouth of the Mississippi River, where everything in that water marked red, there's nothing live in it. Genetically modified organisms, GMOs. GMOs are plant genes that have been modified to withstand whatever it is they're trying to do, forcing the plant rather than giving the plant a choice like we did when we used to do hybridization. We force it by taking genetic material and inserting it and then cloning that. So basically what they've done is create plants that can withstand massive amounts of these pesticides, especially things like Roundup. And now they're including natural plant chemicals like nicotine, which the plant uses to inhibit insects, but now they've got a way with nicotinamides to increase the concentration of those chemicals in plants. And that particular one is devastating our pollinators. We've also seen in the literature references to increased human allergies and gastrointestinal diseases, gluten allergies, all the various things that we talk about on a regular basis. The long-term consequences of consuming these chemicals to inhibit insects is not known, but we do know that they can cause cancers, as we said. Well, I did say that I have hope, but hope requires action. So what can you do to help me have more hope and you to have more hope? You can educate yourself, buy organic and non-GMO products, and that once you've learned that this is a viable solution to your life, spread the word. Well, what do you do to educate yourself? Well, you've just started a good process right here. Learn more about modern agriculture and understand the impacts of the things that we've discussed and how to avoid by not using companies that produce these things, such as Monsanto and Syngenta. There's a lot of others. And then compare your sources. Reliable science education is at an all-time low. So you must be able to tell the difference between good science and poor science. And that just means a little studying and communicating with people that are in the know. Know where your food comes from. How was it grown, processed, delivered? That matters more than ever. Getting nutritious food should not come with a cost to our environment. Organic grass-fed animals, for example, avoid the CAFO disaster. So buy organic non-GMO. This is what we've done as a company. We use grain-placed foods. David and Don Better are farming an organic farm since 1953, and they have a deep appreciation. I call David a minister of the soil. And he's taught me all these things. It took him 20, 30 years for me to really get it, but that's why it's my mission and my passion. Look for the labels. There are various organic certifiers. They're not all the Cadillacs of certifiers, but if you know the company and you ask around, you can find out who's certifying them and whether that's a good source. Certification means a third party comes in using the USDA rules for organic certification, and they inspect the seed, inspect the purchases of those seeds and how much was planted and how much is harvested and where it went, and were all those things done according to those organic standards, all the way from field, farm, to sold from our plant. We also are non-GMO, and now that's being verified. So this ensures that none of those petrochemicals are being used in your food. Spread the word. Watch the science articles and understand it, read about it. Vote with your dollars. That's the most important thing you can do. Yes, it is expensive to buy organic, but that's why, because soil is more expensive to maintain than dirt. All those massive chemicals and massive machines are constantly driving the cost down and increasing the subsidies so they can outcompete with organic from a cost standpoint, but not from a quality standpoint. Spend your money on the brands you trust. Tell your friends, family, clients, anyone who will listen what's going on. And here's some other things you can do. We have a chat on YouTube where we talk to veterinarians and activists, farmers about the things that matter to them in advancement of conservation and agriculture. Don't just take my word. There's an interesting list of books: CAFO's The Tragedy of Industrial Farming, Seeds of Destruction, The Hidden Agenda for Genetic Manipulation. Michael Pollan has a whole series of books, started with the one that deals with most of this called The Omnivore's Dilemma. Should you eat meat that was treated like his calf got treated, or should it be organic? And then one of the historical people was Aldo Leopold. He wrote the Sand County Almanac, and that just kind of is the base for a lot of people. If you don't want to read, there's a lot of things. If you go on our sites, you can get a link to Dreaming of a Better World, where they show how our farmer does things. David Attenborough's Life on Our Planet has a whole series of documented evidences of what's happening in the devastation, and then the solutions are in Kiss the Ground and Need to Grow. So this has been brought to you by our company, Harrison's family of products, Harrison's Bird Foods for companion birds, Wild Wings for wild birds. We just saw that there's a devastation of starvation of birds because of the fires and environmental issues. Tens of, not hundreds of thousands of birds in the western United States didn't have food to migrate correctly this year. So we need to increase the food out there for migratory birds. And then for domestic chickens, we have a chicken food. Thank you for your time and attention.